So we're driving down the highway and I look off to the side and I see this huge mound and there's a bunch of cows standing on this like mini mountain, but it was a mini mountain of manure. It was gross. When you're reading pet food labels, look for real certifications, not just words like natural and holistic. We want to make sure that we are feeding as clean as possible. And is this possible for every single person to do? No. Hi, I'm Dr. Judy Morgan, your pet's advocate. This month we are focusing on the farm. That becomes really critical when we are thinking about what we are going to feed our families and our pets. So for me, for those of you who have been following, you know that this summer we put in raised bed gardens and I have been spending so much time in my garden area eating the most amazing organic fruit and produce, and I haven't had to spend a dime in the produce section of the grocery store except to buy potatoes because I didn't grow those. Gonna go back to that. What I have discovered just in my own little environment is that the food that we are putting on our table, one, tastes totally different when it's raised the right way, and the nutrients in it are so much better. So today I want to talk about definitions of some of these different ways that the food is raised and the differences in the nutrient quality and the longevity and health benefits that we get for us and for our pets. So definitions of farming practices in relation to sourcing food, there's a lot of different ones. So factory farm, not really a legal definition, but it's something that we say quite often, but it refers to the large scale system that maximizes output. So we're using synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, growth hormones, antibiotics, and the animals are often raised in confined feeding operations. So that's what a CAFO is, a confinement animal feeding operation. I had heard about these, read about these. My husband took me to Amarillo, which is where he was raised in that area, and it was the first time that I saw CAFO operations. If you've never seen them, you should really drive by one. So we're driving down the highway and I look off to the side and I see this huge mound and there's a bunch of cows standing on this like mini mountain, but it was a mini mountain of manure. And I said, what is that? And he said, oh, that's a confinement raising beef operation. And I'm like, excuse me? We're going over there. And so we drove down the roads kind of in between where there were literally just pens of cows, elbow to elbow, standing in manure up to their elbows. And then I guess once in a while they must have scraped it off or something and they had these big mounds of manure. And so then there's just cows standing on the manure mountains. It was gross. I don't know how these well, they didn't survive. They got sent to food. So this is defined by the USDA, the Department of Agriculture. It's an intensive animal feeding operation in which over 1,000 animal units are confined for over 45 days a year. An animal unit is the equivalent of 1,000 pounds of live animal weight. 1,000 animal units equates to 700 dairy cows, 1,000 meat cows, 2,500 pigs weighing more than 55 pounds, 10,000 pigs weighing under 55 pounds, 10,000 sheep, 55,000 turkeys, 125,000 chickens, or 82,000 egg-laying hens or pullets. In veterinary school, we had to go to these confinement operations where there's literally thousands of hogs under one roof, tens of thousands of chickens under one roof. Not pretty. So a regenerative farm is defined as focused on rebuilding soil health, biodiversity, and climate resilience via no-till, using cover crops, crop rotation, and holistic grazing. That's what I'm trying to do with my farm. We're trying to regenerate it because when we moved there, the soil was dead and all we were growing was some weeds and dead soil. It was pretty ugly. But frankly, with the animals being on it, rotating the animals, letting our chickens free range and scratch up the soil, adding earthworms, adding soil probiotics. That's regenerative farming, where we are trying to bring it back. And it's amazing. The weeds are much less than what they were. We're getting some really nice cover grass, some really nice clover. It's making a huge difference. An organic farm is certified under USDA organic standards. It bans synthetic chemicals, GMOs, hormones, and routine antibiotics. Animals are fed organic diets and often have outdoor access. But with organic farming, pesticides are still allowed to be used used. They're just labeled for organic use. And I found this out myself when I bought an organic pesticide for my home garden, and when I read the label, it said this will kill your pollinators. I'm like, well, then why would I want to use it? And why would I want it on, if it's going to kill everybody, why do I want this on my plants that I'm going to eat? Supposedly it's safe. I don't think so. Organic, you have to be careful. And now organic fruits and vegetables are allowed to be coated with a peel, which doesn't wash off, and they say that it's safe. Who knows? We don't have long-term studies on it. So what I learned is that if you are spending the money to buy organic produce or fruit in the grocery store, if the PLU, the little code number on it, starts with a 9, it's truly organic. If it starts with a 6, it's got a peel on it. You don't want to buy that. Humanely raised. Humane verified via support of species-appropriate animal welfare or quality programs like Certified Humane, American Humane Certified, Animal Welfare Approved, or GAP. GAP. Pasture-raised animals graze outdoors for much of their life with access to pasture feeding, leading to better omega-3 to 6 ratios. Since it's not federally defined, look for American Grass-Fed Association or Certified Humane indicators. Free range. USDA rules require outdoor access, so this is free range, for greater than 51% of a chicken's life. Okay, they got to be outdoors, which usually is a covered area that's fenced in. They don't specify space size or quality. It's a looser term compared to pasture raised. So free range is not, it just means they're not in a small cage, but they're still really crowded in. Sustainably sourced refers to environmentally sound, socially responsible, and economically viable sourcing, covering soil health, biodiversity, water management, and ethical labor. Look for certifications like MSC on seafood, Rainforest Alliance, Regenerative Organic Certified, or Certified B Corp. Knowing the source of your pet's food is important because it has a direct effect on the nutrients in the food, and we're going to get to that. Recent research has shown increased nutritional value in alternatively farmed foods compared to factory farmed. Shocking. Health promoting phytonutrients, those are plant nutrients, are higher in grass-fed meat and milk. This comes from an article in the Frontiers Journal. What it says is that the effects of livestock production systems on the phytochemical richness, the chemicals in the plants, terpenoids, phenols, carotenoids, and tocopherols of meat and milk. Grazing livestock on plant species diverse pastures concentrates a wider variety of these phytochemicals in the meat and milk compared to animals grazing non-diverse pastures, and phytochemicals are further reduced and often remain absent in meat and milk from animals fed grain-based concentrates in feedlots with no ability to graze at all. Nutritional benefits from fatty acids in organic and grass-fed beef. A review article in 2022 examined whether organic and/or pasture-raised beef confers nutritional benefits compared to conventionally or CAFO-raised beef. The evidence suggests the fatty acid profile of beef meat produced under pasture-based diets has a more nutritionally desirable fatty acid profile, so this is our omega-3s and 6s, than intensively and conventionally reared beef, and to a lesser extent, maybe even compared with organically reared beef. Although some beneficial fatty acids are more prevalent in some analyses of organic beef compared with conventional, the driving force behind the improved fatty acid profile is the forage proportion of the diet, so pasture. This is particularly evident in the much higher percentage of total omega-3 and long-chain fatty acids, EPA and DHA, in pasture-based diets compared to organically reared beef. We want our animals out there in the sunshine, eating what they're meant to eat, what God designed them to eat. Soil health and nutrient density, preliminary comparison of regenerative and conventional farming. This is from an article in 2022. Food crops from 2 no-till regenerative farms, one in California and one in Connecticut. They compared the vitamin mineral levels and plant compounds, the phytochemicals, to conventional equivalents from New York supermarkets. So they went to the supermarket and got stuff that was, raised conventionally versus on these regenerative farms. And what they found in the regenerative crops, on average, they had 34% more vitamin K, 15% more vitamin E, 14% more vitamin B1, 17% more vitamin B2, 11% more calcium, 16% more phosphorus, 27% more copper, 15% more total carotenoids, 20% more total phenolics, and 22% more total phytosterols. When comparing the unsaturated fatty acid profiles of pork and beef raised on regenerative farms to that from a regional health-promoting brand using conventional agriculture, the regeneratively raised products had higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids. Regenerative beef has 3 times more omega-3 fats and 6 times more alpha-linolenic acid, the ALA. It also had 50 to 75% more long-chain omega-3s, the EPA, DPA, and DHA, and 66% of the omega-6 fats, making for an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio 1/5 as large as conventional beef. And so when we are looking for food for our pets, our omnivorous, carnivorous dogs and cats, we want the omega-6 to 3 ratio to ideally be less than 5 to 1. In food that is less than stellar, those ratios are commonly 30 to 1. That's not where we want them to be. That's an inflammatory diet. That's why this is so important. Regenerative pork has 9 times the omega-3s and 3 times the omega-6s, making the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio 1/3 as large as for conventional pork. It also had more than 11 times more ALA, 2 times more EPA, 3 times more DPA, and 4 times more DHA than conventional pork. This is pretty critical. And we're talking about the regenerative farming. I just started grinding my own organic wheat berries to make my own organic wheat flour, because flour that we buy in the grocery store, it's commonly bleached. It has added vitamins and minerals added back in because we know that it's nutritionally devoid. And when you buy highly processed, like breakfast cereals, oatmeals that have been highly processed, we lose all that nutrient value. It's so much more critical to be looking at the sourcing of the food. How is it raised? What kind of soil is it raised in? Is it organic? What's it being sprayed with? The less processed it is when you buy it, the more nutrients are going to be available. And as a matter of fact, when I grind my own flour, I have to store it in the freezer if I'm not going to use it immediately. So I grind as much as I need to be used within a few days, because it's not going to last on the shelf like the stuff that we buy in the grocery store, because that has been treated so that it's not going to go bad. And by the way, even if you're buying store-bought flour, store it in your freezer for a week before you use it, because sometimes there's still bugs in there, and that's why you get those little bugs in your pantry. If you put your flour in the freezer and take it out of there to use it, you don't have a bug problem. Organic production enhances milk nutritional quality by shifting fatty acid composition. This was an 18-month study in the US in 2013. Averaged over 12 months, organic milk contained 25% less omega-6 fatty acids and 62% more omega-3 fatty acids than conventional milk, yielding a 2.5-fold higher omega-6 to 3 ratio in conventional milk compared to organic milk. So it was a 5.77 ratio in the conventional milk and 2.28 in the organic milk. So you see we're getting below that 5 where we want to be. All individual omega-3 fatty acid concentrations were higher in organic milk. Alpha-lactic ALA by 60%, EPA by 32%, DPA by 19%, and conjugated linoleic acid was higher by 18%. Another study in 2016, composition differences between organic and conventional meat. Organic meat and dairy contains significantly more omega-3s by about 50 to 60%. Organic produce often has higher antioxidants, vitamin C, iron, magnesium, and phosphorus. Evidence from controlled experimental studies indicates the high grazing, forage-based diets prescribed under organic farming standards are probably the main difference in the fatty acid profiles. Nutritional quality of organic versus conventional fruits, vegetables, and grains, like my flour that I'm now making. Organic crops contain significantly more vitamin C, iron, magnesium, and phosphorus, and significantly less nitrates than conventional crops. There were non-significant trends showing less protein but of a better quality and a higher content of nutritionally significant minerals with lower amounts of heavy metals in organic crops compared to conventional ones. When you're reading pet food labels, look for real certifications, not just words like natural and holistic. We want to see USDA organic, certified humane, MSC, regenerative organic certified. Those are the kinds of things that we should be looking for in our ingredient labels. Things like natural, free range may have very little meaning unless we have verification. Because remember, free range can just be that the chickens and turkeys are not held in little cages. It's kind of a bigger cage that might be the size of a football field undercover, but they're still crammed in there. Check brand info because reliable brands disclose sourcing and farming standards. And a lot of the pet food companies now, when you go on their website, they actually say beef hearts come from this farm, and it shows, gives you the name of the farm. You can look them up and see what they're doing. And believe me, they're not going to tell you that information if it's coming from that confinement beef operation outside of Amarillo. They're not going to say, oh, we get it from this farm. Look at these cows standing on mountains of manure. Yeah, that's not where we want to get it. Ingredient priority. Meat and meat meals should specify the source. So it should be chicken or chicken meal, not poultry meal or meat meal, because meat is an unnamed source. It could be anything thrown in there, particularly if you have an animal with food intolerances or allergies. You need to know exactly what's in there. And look for organic or regenerative whenever possible. Choose meat first. Look for organic, regenerative, pasture-raised proteins for better omega-3s. Favor sustainably farmed ingredients, particularly in your vegetables, grains, if you feed them, and oils. We want to make sure that we are feeding as clean as possible. And is this possible for every single person to do? No. Do the best you can with the resources that you have. I realize some people live in food deserts and you don't have much opportunity. You need to balance the quality with what your budget can afford. Not everybody can afford all regenerative farmed, organic, sustainably raised, blah, blah, blah. But just know that the health outcomes when you are heading down this road are so much better than the health outcomes when we are feeding nutrient void, confinement raised, high omega-6 products. So find trustworthy brands. Several pet food makers now feature regenerative or organic sourcing. Susan Thixton's list at truthaboutpetfood.com is a great source of information because the companies have to provide Susan bills of lading with where they're getting all of their products. I also have the Dr. Judy approved pet food list, things that I'm willing to feed my pets. This is not near as exhaustive as Susan's list. I don't make companies show me bills of lading. They're companies that I've worked with and have been very transparent and things that I can get for my pets. So it's not exhaustive because I don't live in California. So there may be brands out there that I don't know anything about. And rotate and complement. So my dogs don't eat the same thing day in and day out. They don't even eat the same thing for breakfast that they eat for lunch. This morning's breakfast was whole ground rabbit mixed with a veggie grind from a company that I love. Sometimes it's homemade meal with things fresh from my own farm. We raise our own chickens, we raise our own eggs. It's gonna vary. If you can't feed full organic, if you can't get all grass-fed, blah, 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 rotate and add in as much as you can. So if you are still in that mindset or still in the budget area that says, okay, I'm gonna have to feed some kibble or I'm gonna have to have a base that's less expensive, add in what you can when you can. The whole goal is to keep inflammation down in the body, and we do that by having better omega-6 to 3 ratio. We want that number to be low. And so when we are feeding from these higher value foods, we're going to keep that lower and we're going to have less inflammation and less problems. Ideally, down the road, because we all know that cancer is a product of chronic inflammation. If we keep the inflammation at bay, hopefully we keep the cancer at bay. Do the best you can. Palmitoyl ethanolamide, also known as PEA, I started using it with my own Cavaliers, and I was so impressed by the results that I decided to make human-grade, high-quality PEA available for other pets. After successfully using Dr. Judy's PEA on cats, dogs, horses, and donkeys, it continues to be one of my favorite tools to have in my toolbox. Take 15% off any size of Dr. Judy's PEA using code YTP15 at naturallyhealthypets.com. That's YTP15 for 15% off any size of Dr. Judy's PEA at naturallyhealthypets.com.